Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 6th CAAC mini symposium. It's nice to see so many people already here in the audience. And I'm also really grateful to Roberto Castillo and Hali Leung and the whole Center for Cultural Research and Development for organizing this talk and for allowing me to serve as a guest moderator. Today, we will be hearing from 3 presenters who've each conducted extensive ethnographic research on Africa-China connections: Vivian Lu of Fordham University, Derek Sheridan of Academia Sinica, and Mingwei Huang of Dartmouth. This grouping started out as a panel that was actually submitted to the CAAC conference that was planned to take place in 2020. And at the time, we were interested in looking at relationships between migration conceived in a circular rather than a linear fashion and unevenness in terms of capital, geopolitics, race, ethnicity, and class. And today we'll have a chance to hear how the work of each of these authors has evolved over the past year or two. And hopefully this will also give us a chance to reflect on the significance of ethnography as a particular mode of inquiring into China-Africa relations. So each speaker will present for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open up to a discussion of questions from the audience. Please type your questions into the chat. You can already start doing that as the speakers are speaking, or you can wait until the Q&A begins. And I will try to summarize the questions during the Q&A, but unfortunately, we can only take questions that are entered into the chat, so please make sure to enter them. And with that, I will introduce our first presenter. So Vivian Chenxue Lu is a cultural anthropologist and assistant professor at Fordham University in New York City. She was a visiting PhD student at the University of Lagos for several years. Before that, her first book project looks at capitalism and identity along Nigerian commercial networks of the Global South. And today she'll present Emplacing Capital: Import Anxieties and Profit Policies in Nigerian South-South Commerce. So welcome, Vivian.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and to the organizers. I will share my screen now. Okay, and get started. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present my work today. I'll be drawing from my first book project on the politics of profit amongst transnational Nigerian commerce and migration towards the Global South. So broadly, I'm interested in how increasing circular migrations amongst the Global South are transforming Nigerian economic and political life. And this image here is just to show you, give you a sense of some of the link spaces I'm talking about. The foreground is a defunct Nigerian business logistic company that was connecting Lagos and Guangzhou. And the background image is a highway that connects Nigeria's major port to other West African port cities in Benin, Togo, and Ghana. And it's also the site of a new Chinese light rail project. So I put them here just as a composite, just as a shortcut way. We're on Zoom, so I'm trying to be more visual to visualize some of the spatial linkages at play here. So in the short talk today, I'll trace how Nigerian merchants mobilize a distinct politics of emplacement in Nigeria, where market actors explicitly attempt to control and create the conditions of economic exchange through political claims to profit and the rhetoric of citizenship. So exploring emplacement amongst African migrants in China has been an important process of investigation by China-Africa ethnographers, including, of course, our organizer, Roberto Castillo. And in this paper, I'm going to turn the focus towards countries of origin. So Nigeria is located here on Africa's west coast. It is Africa's largest population and West Africa's regional economic hegemon. As you can see here, an estimated 1 in 6 Africans is a Nigerian. And Nigeria also is the country of origin of Africa's largest contemporary diaspora and receives the most diasporic remittance in Africa. Nigeria's major banks, for example, now have diaspora accounts and credit cards, as you can see here on the website of a major Nigerian bank. And the Nigerian government also has been increasingly invested in formalizing connections with its diaspora through the establishment of a diaspora commission. So historically, Nigeria's colonial and oil export economy has geopolitically situated it closely with the West, or aligned it closely with the West. Yet in the past 2 decades, in the past 2 decades, I think it's, I just saw in the chat, I just took a screenshot there. So anyway, in the past 2 decades, the economic landscape of Nigeria has shifted quietly away from the West. Its 2 most prominent trade partners of both commodity imports and oil exports are now China and India, respectively. And interestingly, a vast majority of African migration now occurs between countries on the African continent and towards Asia, rather than towards the West. So this is just some of the backdrop to my PhD research, where I conducted 18 months of ethnographic and archival fieldwork amongst networks of Igbo Nigerian importers who are mobile across the global South. Some of my preliminary research in the early years of my PhD were in African trade sites in Guangzhou, Dubai, and briefly in Istanbul, but most of my fieldwork was based in the Nigerian megacity of Lagos, with some short trips to southeastern Nigeria, which is the ancestral region of origin of Igbo Nigerians, who are the most populous Nigerians conducting business in China. I shadowed importers and business logistic companies. I interviewed market association leaders and conducted participant observation with importers' families, particularly siblings, girlfriends, wives, and daughters. I conducted research as well in the Nigerian colonial and post-colonial archives. So first, before I dive into 2 quick ethnographic anecdotes, a few things to consider about mobility in these networks. So by the end of my fieldwork in 2017, nearly all of my interlocutors were back in Nigeria. So these, were very much trajectories that were centered around Nigeria. This contrasts sharply with more immigration-oriented trajectories towards the West. And this is, of course, partially due to difficulties of permanent migration for Nigerians in places like China or Dubai. Interestingly, it's difficult to find many depictions in Nigerian popular culture and literature of traveling to China and Asia, which is seen as much less glamorous as travel towards the West. Sorry, is there an issue with my PowerPoint?
There's some black, yeah, like now when you moved your mouse, it showed, and there's something in the top left corner too.
Okay, is that okay?
It's still covered by this black thing.
I see. That I'm not sure at all about.
Do you want me to try to do it?
Is it you can't see any of the images, or?
We can see the images, I think.
Okay.
I will keep okay now.
Okay. All right. I hope that's better. Okay. So, as I was saying, okay. So it's difficult to find many depictions in Nigerian popular culture and literature of traveling to China and Asia, which is seen as much less glamorous as travel towards the West. So this leads to 2 questions I'll quickly consider today. The first is, how does South-South circular migration generate new kinds of economic formations in Nigeria? And I suggest that these newer South-South circular migrations are regenerating and reanimating investment in building and maintaining market spaces in Nigeria that explicitly foreground Nigerian economic actors. And secondly, I want to consider, how does South-South circular migration sharpen political critiques at home? I'll briefly touch on how these experiences transform conceptions of home, specifically growing political interest in neo-secessionist movements in Nigeria. And so lastly, just for the purposes of the panel, I wanted us to consider how China-Africa studies and analytics might expand and or limit our understandings from a Nigerian vantage point. For many of my interlocutors, China was one of many destinations in their networks. And in my interviews, it was very common to see siblings and cousins from the same family located in a range of other places like Dubai, Turkey, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Brazil, Pakistan, and other African countries, notably South Africa, Angola, Mozambique, and other West African countries. Thus, how do we consider China in this constellation of other global South destinations? What kinds of economic possibilities and imaginaries do these African South-South migrations generate? And so with this in mind, I want to now quickly turn to 2 fieldwork scenes. So in 2015, Martins, a Nigerian man, returned to Nigeria after 15 years of living in China. He was in his mid-30s, and as he said in his own words, he wasn't getting any younger. He wanted to construct a house in his ancestral hometown in southeastern Nigeria so that he could finally get married. For work, Martins ran a shoe importation business and operated 2 shops, one in southeastern Nigeria and one in Lagos. When I first met him in 2012, he was living in China. He was regularly pooling money with 31 other men from his ancestral hometown who were all living and doing business in China at the time. They each contributed about $200 every 2 months for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, these men collected the money to finance the construction of a plaza in an eastern Nigerian city. The plaza had 32 equally sized shops, each one owned by one trader. So in this talk, I'll refer to this kind of market, this kind of collective model of plaza as a trader-raised market, meaning trader financed, constructed, etc. So transnational Nigerian merchants like Martins are making and replicating new kinds of markets, particularly these trader-raised ones. Commerce in Nigeria is strikingly decentralized. Unlike many other countries, there's no dominant foreign or domestic corporate retailers, and only an estimated 2% of Nigerian retail passes through corporate channels. Commerce has actually been an extremely significant site of contestation in Nigerian colonial and post-colonial history. Post-colonial countries have long debated tactics to re-envision economic formations to entrap capital to circulate domestically in the neo-colonial wakes of colonialism. One example of this is that in the African context, indigenizing capitalism was an explicit feature of many post-colonial projects in the 1970s and 80s. In Nigeria, indigenization explicitly banned non-Nigerian citizens from the commercial sector. Indigenization policies were not completely effective, but combined with economic crises in the 1980s and 1990s, all major remaining colonial legacy companies withdrew from Nigerian commerce. And these are just some headlines from the 1970s and 80s. Although indigenization laws are no longer in systematic effect today, in practice, many market associations ban, and including the trader-raised ones I'm talking about especially, ban all non-Nigerian nationals from operating in certain markets without a Nigerian business partner. And by the end of the 1990s, smaller scale merchants began filling this gap. And by the 2010s, most international airlines operating out of Lagos were based in and faced towards the global south. So Martins, after moving back to Nigeria in 2015, he spent most of his time in Lagos in a market area known as Trade Fair. And I shadowed his business during fieldwork and came to learn about this place. It had similarly been constructed by groups of Nigerian merchants, but on a much larger scale. Trade Fair has been, in fact, built by hundreds of collectives of merchants over the last few decades in Lagos. So this is just an aerial view of the place. It's hard to get a sense of scale from the street level, but it's an area of Lagos that's home to about 60,000 traders like Martins, and this is one of Lagos's largest commercial areas. So Lagos, very quickly, is just home to some of West Africa's largest markets, like this famous historical area of Lagos Island. And Trade Fair is located in a different part of Lagos on a sparsely populated side, and was built by thousands of traders who relocated from this older area in the 1990s. So kind of moving from the eastern side to more the western side. It's a major destination for containers of imports coming from Asia and the Middle East. And by 2013, an estimated 300,000 people operated in the complex on a daily basis. So again, using the same model that Martins built his Eastern Nigerian plaza, each one of the plazas that you see here was financed, so it's hard to see, but from above any of these squares, basically, was financed without state or corporate bank loans and are co-owned by between 50 to 100 traders. So here's just a street level view where you can see some of the plazas. They're architecturally uniform. The shops are the same size, roughly. Here's another visual just for you to get a sense. Here's the entrance of one of the market areas under construction. So strikingly, police state police do not enter this space. It's fully run by market associations and their security forces. These associations mandate the architecture of plazas. They adjudicate market disputes. They determine who can transact in this space and how. So non-Black foreigners are not allowed to own a shop space or rent them on their own. Some associations restrict the hours and days during which non-Nigerian actors could operate. So in practice, while there's some non-Nigerian merchants from other West African nations like Ghana or Mali, the trade fair organizations hold their line with non-Black foreign nationals such as Lebanese, European, Indian business people historically, and now increasingly Chinese business people. Market associations were explicit about these measures being important in protecting Nigerian people's abilities to thrive and profit in Nigeria. So I just first take this case of trade fair to consider how markets are sites where ideas of national citizenship and are articulated and enacted by citizens, which are shaped by desires to entrap and emplace capital in Nigeria. The global commerce of Nigerian business people, The global commerce of Nigerian business people like Martins is anchored by strong control over commercial spaces at home. Indeed, in my fieldwork, Nigerian business people spoke about markets not simply as sites of exchange or transaction, but rather dynamic choreographies of marshaling, diverting, negotiating, and controlling distributive flows and channels of profit. So these commercial spaces which foreground Black Nigerian actors must be read through ongoing post-colonial political discourse and colonial histories. So I'll now quickly turn to how these markets have become interesting sites of political contestation and expression. So my second fieldwork, very quick fieldwork anecdote. So in 2014, while working in markets in Lagos, I often heard on the radio a strikingly bittersweet Nigerian pop song entitled Wayo Wayo, meaning slow and steady. In cascading Igbo and Nigerian pidgin, pop singer Flavor sang a song of going to China and being deported. So I'll play you 1 minute of that here.
Go see wetin man fit chop. At all I know, brother, you know easy. Too much pressure coming from family, from family. I challenge myself. I begin waka. I enter Chingo, Chingo to Guangzhou, Guangzhou to Hangzhou, Hangzhou to Shanghai, Shanghai to Beijing, on to Sena to Beijing. I come with the pots, I come with the pots. Moritala Mohammed, make us a pots. I don't die, yo. My brother, take a miss, before I go, my sister, take a miss, before I go,
Okay, so Flavor's song hails his Nigerian brothers and sisters across the world, and through the story of a deportation from China, he projects a message of going slow and steady, which is the title of the song. In contemporary popular Nigerian discourse, the fast lane is a popular euphemism for high-risk money-making. So the refrain slow and steady directly confronts the idea of the fast lane or risky money-making activities, and it highlights the risks of mobility, its emotional tolls, gendered and kin expectations, and the experiences of state-sanctioned violence in places like Asia while abroad. So throughout my fieldwork, many older and more established business people describe the fast lane as evidence of the recklessness and amorality of Nigerian youth who are interested in making money too fast. But for my interlocutors in their 20s and 30s, the fast lane was not a representation of what was wrong with Nigerian youth and morality, but rather symptomatic of broader geopolitical and economic problems plaguing Nigeria. They regularly attributed the existence of the fast lane to the Nigerian state's failures. One young man I knew in Lagos named Ike, for example, graduated from the University of Ibadan with a degree in statistics, but was unable to find salaried work after graduation. This is a very common story. He then started buying and selling jeans in Lagos in 2011, and then in 2014, he started traveling to China and Turkey. He described his first experiences abroad like this. The first time I traveled, I blamed the Nigerian government for so many things, for not putting things in place. I felt so bad. Most countries now, when you get there, you see Nigerians are connecting everywhere. Every nook and cranny, you see a Nigerian, and you begin to wonder who's the cause of all these things. Me, what I believe is that the Nigerian government is not really doing what they're supposed to do, and this is why a lot of people struggle. Someone like me who finished university, I have to join business and all that, traveling to eat. So like the Slow and Steady song, for Ike and many others like him, seeing so many Nigerians conducting business across the world evoked a sense of awe. Yet it also provoked sharper critiques of the conditions that have forced such widespread searches to make money, leading Ike to wonder who and what was the cause of all these things. So many of my interlocutors narrated experiences of becoming politicized while in Asia and witnessing the often violent racialized experiences of both the Nigerian diaspora and more broadly Black people across the world. Upon return to Nigeria, many like Ike have begun participating in different political movements for the first time, including neo-secessionist movements that are agitating for increased independence in southeastern Nigeria. So you may have heard recently of the news in the last month that Twitter banned Nigeria's President Buhari from Twitter, who subsequently banned Twitter in Nigeria completely. And the president's tweet that sparked this whole controversy was one that explicitly concerned neo-Biafran secessionists who were mobilizing around the anniversary of Biafra, which is was in the southeastern region of Nigeria's secession in 1967, which sparked the Nigerian Civil War. So recent neo-secessionist movements have gained popularity amongst many Igbo-speaking people in Nigeria and its diaspora, who are increasingly articulating discontent with the Nigerian nation state through secessionist rhetoric. This is just an example from my archival research of documents relating to the secession. So commerce across Nigeria is ubiquitous and conducted by members of all ethnicities, but in the last few decades, Igbo traders have been most notably associated with finessing the global importation market of consumer goods, leading to many national stereotypes, like this kind of stereotypical depiction in a magazine. They've become very prominent in major wholesale markets in Nigeria, and many Igbo people are generally stereotyped as a business-minded minority. But a lot of my interlocutors continually talked about their disproportionate representation in commerce as a creative and necessary response to historic discrimination and systematic exclusion by the post-war petrostate. So commercial markets have emerged as particularly symbolic sites of Igbo livelihood in contemporary Nigeria. Recent pro-secessionist activism has increasingly used market closures as a significant site of political expression. And so interestingly, while commercial spaces like trade fair explicitly prioritize Nigerian citizens as economic actors, they've also increasingly become significant sites of popular expressions around race, ethno-regional identity, and nationality. So just very quickly to conclude on the talk, I've tried to show two different dimensions of emplacement along transnational circulations of people, capital, and commodities. So on one hand, the work of merchants like Martins is generating new markets, attempting to trap capital where they pursue new kinds of mercantile work in sites like China and reconfigure commercial space in Nigeria. But on the other hand, you see also that circular migrations and experiences abroad also exemplify how contemporary capitalism is geopolitically fraught and unevenly experienced. Importantly, circular migrations serve to sharpen political consciousness and critique at home. And somewhat paradoxically, I suggest the increase of transnational mobility has increased the stakes and importance of the meanings of national and diasporic citizenship. So thank you. I look forward to hearing and answering your questions.